You're watching Beyond Markets. Welcome, I'm Esther Awoniyi. Many thanks for joining us. On today's show, we'll discuss the trial of Nigeria's suspended Chief Justice and how the pre-election environment is shaping up in Nigeria. You can join the conversation with the hashtag Beyond Markets, and you can follow my Twitter handle too at Esther Awoniyi. Now, Nigeria's judiciary system has been in the forefront for the wrong reasons in the past weeks. The commencement of the trial of Nigeria's suspended Chief Justice by the Code of Conduct Tribunal over the non-declaration of assets is at the core of the issue. Eze Onyekpere, lead director for the Center for Social Justice, joins me from Abuja to assess the situation. Eze, thank you for taking the time out to join us today.
My pleasure.
Now, it's been quite interesting how this story has unfolded, especially how there have been several interpretations, several opinions. There's been this mix, this divide, as it were, even within the legal community as to how the method by which the Chief Justice of Nigeria was removed or suspended. And it would appear that, looking at the 99 Constitution, and I've heard lawyers give different interpretations, but let's just hear your perspective. You are very strongly against the removal or the suspension of the Chief Justice of Nigeria. Tell us why.
Well, very well. I'm not here to talk about what lawyers have said. I'm a legal practitioner. I've been so for the past 30 years. Not just to talk about what lawyers have been saying based on the issue of where their partisan interest lies. We should be interested in what the Constitution says. And the Constitution is clear on the ways or method or approach of removing a chief judge. You've got to go through the legislature, and the executive should be involved. In the other case, you have the NJC, you have to make a recommendation to the president for disciplinary action. And none of those methods have been followed. So clearly the Constitution was violated. So I think the wrong procedure was followed and that the president did not allow the due process of law to unveil. Because even if you look at it, beyond even the procedure, the chief judge was charged to a court and he opposed the jurisdiction of the tribunal. Okay, and on the 22nd, both the prosecution and the defense were there, and then they had wanted to move a motion to remove him. And the court said, come back on the 28th, move your motion for opposition to the jurisdiction, and then let the motion also for removing the CJ be moved after we've determined we have jurisdiction. And adjourned. And purportedly on the 23rd, the prosecution went back to the tribunal, and the tribunal now gave an ex parte order. I just look at it. There's no need for anybody to be arguing because of partisan interests. It's a very straightforward matter.
Now, we know that the suspended Chief Justice approached the appeal court asking it to stop the Code of Conduct Tribunal from trying him, but the appeal court has asked the Code of Conduct Tribunal to go ahead, and we have a February 14 date for him to be tried. And you have said that that February 14 date has far-reaching consequences. Could you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, very well. Since the appeal court has ruled, I expect the tribunal to proceed. But you also remember that the National Judicial Council has sat. And then petitions were presented against the Chief Justice of Nigeria. Petitions were also presented against the acting Chief Justice. And so we expect the National Judicial Council to take a position which will be binding. I had expected the president to allow the due process, like now the Court of Appeal has ruled, or now that the National Judicial Council has been seized of the matter, for them to now to make a decision which will now be the basis of either retaining or removing the chief judge. So rather than the arbitrary way and manner in which it has been done. But I think we should also focus on the takeaways. In every challenge, in every distressing situation, there must be positive takeaways. And what are these positive takeaways? Now, let us make the assets declaration of all public officers, from the president to the cleaner, public, so that Nigerians can interrogate them and bring evidence of either over declaration of assets or under declaration of assets, so that it will help us to cleanse the system, not just selectively, because the Chief Justice is not the only Nigerian who has declared his assets. And some of us had actually applied to the CCB, asking for asset declarations of the president and the vice president. I applied, and the CCB said they cannot do that, that the National Assembly is here to make a law under which they will reveal the assets. So under which law did they give the assets of the Chief Justice of Nigeria to the NGO that brought the petition. So this idea of double standards, this idea of, it will not work. So let us take positive things out of this sad experience.
There have also been concerns about, the sanctity of separation of powers among the three arms of government. What is your perspective in terms of if you feel that there's been a gross violation here, and what you think this could do in terms of how people, especially on the outside of the country, perceive how we practice separation of powers? The
law and constitution is clear. If you want to appoint a judge, it starts from the judicial side, gets to the executive, gets to the legislature. The three arms are involved in appointment. It's also expected that the three arms come together in removal. Now, when this is violated, when the separation of powers is thrown overboard, Nigeria begins to look like a banana republic. I'm even seeing the newspapers today talking about how investors are reacting to the removal of the chief judge. And these are negative reactions and sentiments that are even affecting our stock exchange. So it is a very, very unfortunate scenario. And nobody can claim that he is doing a higher good by breaching the laws, because one of the greatest good is to obey the laws.
How do you see this playing out? Obviously, this isn't over. It's still a developing story, especially the next date, February 14. How do you see this playing out in terms of the kind of ruling or outcome that we could have?
I believe the National Judicial Council will be able to take steps even before that date so that the sanctity of the judiciary can be restored, and also going forward so that everybody will know where the line is drawn and what should be next.
Let's move on to the broader issue of the judiciary on its own and allegations of corruption, allegations that some judges have, are corrupt, take bribe many times, and even the CJN himself. Some comments from the federal government saying that it was brought to their attention that many cases, corruption cases, brought against some notable Nigerians by the federal government were dismissed under his watch due to one or two minor technicalities, they called it. What are your thoughts on that, and how that is being said to be one of the reasons why they think, aside from the non-declaration of his assets, that he could be a corrupt judge, as it were?
There is no evidence of corruption so far against the chief judge. Okay, what is there is that he failed to declare some assets. And take it from me, you are discussing a man who should be between 45 and 50 years at the bar. We left with only a couple of years, 1 or 2 years for him to retire. And so he must have worked hard to earn a lot of the things that people are alleging that he has. So in essence, corruption is not just a judicial problem. It's a problem all over Nigeria. And that's why I'm talking about the positives. We must fight corruption across board. We must open up asset declarations. We must do the undertakings which we promised to do before the whole world under the Open Governance Partnership, when we said we need a publicly available beneficial owners register of companies in Nigeria. Even in the UK, they've taken it forward to have such a register for landed property. We must also begin to take seriously our undertakings in open contracting so that we know those who are doing the government commerce and who exactly own these companies. So when we open up the system, when we divide the office of the Attorney General from that of the Minister of Justice, don't combine them. Minister of Justice is a politician. He will always play politics. Attorney General should be a very good technocrat, a very good lawyer with sound training and with good ethics, who can make sure prosecution is not done by party labels or what your ideas of life has been. So I think we should focus more on the positives. It's not about the judiciary alone. It's everywhere. And what will tell you that the current administration is failing is that the last Transparency International CPI index that was released, Corruption Perception Index, clearly showed that we did 27 over 100 last year, and this year we are still doing 27. So we are marking time. We are stagnating. It's not about movement in a barber's chair. It is about actual motion. There must be positives from this very sad experience. Otherwise, we are losing it.
I hear you when you say that corruption isn't only in the judiciary, it's everywhere. But some people argue that it's especially concerning when we talk about corruption in the judiciary, because when we talk about the rule of law, the courts, that is a reprieve for the common man. That's the last resort. That's where the common man goes to seek justice. So if that system is corrupt, then what does that say about our ability to implement our rule of law?
The same judge we are referring to now as purportedly corrupt was not corrupt when he ruled, I think, around 2007, 2008, that Buhari won the election, even though he was in the minority in the Supreme Court. Why, at what point did he become corrupt? If you remember that some of these assets is being alleged that he didn't declare were around 2011, 2012. And this was before he was due to be appointed the Chief Justice. And the security agencies, the DSS, the EFCC, all of them were supposed to do background checks on him and send this to the Senate for his screening and approval. So does it mean that the DSS and Co did not have access to this information before then, or that it was presented and the Senate overlooked it? We need to get to the bottom of this thing. I am saying that there is no political will to fight corruption in Nigeria. What Buhari's government is doing...
Even within the judicial system?
No. There's no will. They are simply personalizing and making partisan a very noble objective which every Nigerian can ascribe to say we are fighting corruption. They have made it look so partisan. They have pedestrianized it. So the political will is not there. It's just a question of using it for their own selfish purposes.
Okay.
Like this question I asked, why did DSS not bring this up since this thing happened in 2011, 2012? Why are we hearing of it in 2019?
Okay, if there's no political will from those quarters, I mean, that is why we have
absolutely no political will.
Which is why we have
so what you're doing is simply picking up a few people.
Yes. So what is it that you do?
That's
if there's no political, the politicians won't do it. If the lawmakers and everyone else won't do it.
What we have done
is like CSOs?
We have asked about this gentleman's access declaration and we are turned down. Some of us went to court. So many organizations have gone to court, and the courts confirmed their position that until the National Assembly makes a law, we said no. There's a freedom of information law. The court said no. So the case is on appeal. So that's what we are doing. And some of us have even gone further to draft an access declaration bill is waiting for either the executive and the legislature to take it up so that that part of the constitution which they say bars them from revealing, it says it should be under a law made by the National Assembly. I say this is a draft bill. So we're in court, we've done a draft bill, so what else are we supposed to do? We are not in the Senate, we are not in the House of Reps, we are not the president, we are not the governors. So we can only do so far. That's why I'm insisting there's no political will. If there was a political will, this will not happen.
Okay, Eze, we're going to take a short break here. Thank you for your time so far. I've been speaking to Eze Onyekpere, the lead director for the Center for Social Justice. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Beyond Markets. If you're just joining us, Eze Onyekpere, lead director for the Center for Social Justice, is with me today from Abuja, and we are discussing the environment ahead of Nigeria's presidential elections. Eze, thank you for your time so far. Let's move on to how things are progressing with the 2019 election. So we're just about less than 2 weeks away now, and there's been so many issues brought to the fore, ranging from INEC's preparedness, the political parties, voter education especially. We're having a lot of people voting, millions voting for the first time this time, and of course the need for voter education. But what is your perspective, and what has the Center for Social Justice been doing to help make the process easier, especially creating awareness for voters?
Well, very well. I think that INEC should be adequately prepared because they ask for money, which has been approved for them between the executive and the legislature, and I understand it's also been disbursed. So a lot has gone into logistics, and they also have had money for voter education. And a lot of civil society organizations are also engaged in civic education, asking people to come out and vote, and then also asking people not to sell their vote, asking them how much exactly is their vote worth. And of course, as we do the countdown, the political parties and their candidates are going around the country asking to be supported. So I believe that we are moving in the right direction, and it is for the Independent National Electoral Commission to do its job, and also the security agencies, that they should be properly mobilized, trained, and taken care of in terms of their welfare, so that on that day they go to the field and do a very impartial job. So I believe that we are moving in the right direction, only that the few hiccups like the crisis we have in the judiciary, which was not expected at this time, and also the fact that the electoral bill that was passed by the National Assembly so many times was not signed into law by the president. So I still foresee technical challenges to the election because the card reader was supposed to be the centerpiece of our elections, and that was how the bill propounded it. Because at the last time, when the matters went up to the Supreme Court, The Supreme Court said that the card reader is a very wonderful innovation, but unfortunately, it's not provided in our law. So if there's a conflict about saying you didn't use the card reader, you only use the manual register, that the courts will rely on the manual register since that is provided in the law, and that if the legislature or INEC thinks that the card reader is such a wonderful thing, that they should provide for it in the law. And of course, that's what the National Assembly did. Unfortunately, the president, for reasons best known to him, refused to append his signature to the bill. And what we have is a situation that even the INEC report that came out showed that where the card reader was neglected in 2015, that out of about 12-13 million votes counted, that about 75% of it was in favor of Mr. President. So somehow he neglected or refused to sign the bill thinking he will get an advantage. So we are still going to face a lot of challenges in the card reader not being used and then the manual register used and maybe to manipulate a few elections. That will likely happen from the way I see things, considering the great number of people that we are registered. And I also think another major challenge is the millions of cards, PVCs that have been produced but have not been dispersed in terms of people have not come forward to collect them. My thinking is that INEC should get to a situation where it will, on its portal, on its website, put those numbers of cards in the public domain. It doesn't cost it much, okay? So that if we ever see those cards being used, we now know that something is wrong, so that Nigerians will know and the political parties will know the numbers of those cards and who owns them exactly, that we are not eventually distributed. Otherwise, I think things are going on well. It's left for Nigerians on that day to come out. It's also left for INEC to do its job very well. It's also left for the security agencies to be neutral, but if the experience we had in particularly Osun is anything to go by Osun State in last year, then there is cause for alarm, there's cause for fear. But all the same, let's believe that everybody will respect himself this time around and work in accordance with the law.
Okay, what is your assessment of the conduct of political parties so far, especially the campaigns that we've seen so far?
The campaigns have not been as much issue-driven as I would have loved it to be. We still see people talking in general terms or trying to talk down on the opposition or talk down on the other party. We are not seeing a lot of issues. And then the recent idea that when the president went to one of the northern states and then you had people coming in from political office holders from Niger Republic or which other country coming in with their supporters is also a cause for alarm. It's a little bit frightening or threatening because you know that our borders are very porous. Is that a sign that non-Nigerians have our PVCs or will let into Nigeria to vote? We are not yet certain. Well, the ruling party is saying, oh, nothing is wrong by your neighbors identifying with you. But you remember that the Electoral Act says you should not take resources from any foreign country or from any foreigner. Once you have such resources, you turn it over to INEC. But what this signifies, whether it's just their mere presence or resources exchange hands, or is a way to say that people will come in from outside Nigeria, you know that these boundaries are a little bit artificial. I understand there are over 1,000 footpaths in certain parts of Nigeria up north there where people can walk in beyond the recognized boundaries where you have immigration and also the same people who may be speaking the same language. So it becomes very difficult to identify who is Nigerian and who is Nigerian as to participation in the votes once they have that PVC. So that's also a challenge I foresee, and that's why we are saying the security agencies should do their jobs in a very neutral manner.
What about, how would you describe the voters themselves, voter apathy? Would you say that that's significantly lower this time? Would you say that people, compared to 2015, there are more people who are willing to participate this year?
I believe more people are willing to participate, particularly if you know that even socio-cultural groups have already started to take a stand. I think if you listen to the news yesterday, about 4 or 5 socio-cultural groups came together to endorse one candidate. And also, Nigeria is very deeply divided, more divided than we were in 2015, among the religious and ethnic and other sectional cleavages. So everybody will likely participate to make sure that his vote counts and that what he believes in is what becomes dominant at the end of the day. So I believe that there's enough sensitization, there's enough mobilization, there's enough anger on both sides, those who want the current administration out and those who want the status quo to remain. So I see very great voter turnout and a lot of votes being used and counted for the elections.
Now there's this group, a CSO group called Yaga Africa, and they put out a report to actually the initial stages of the preparations for the election and just recently They called it watching the vote, and they did some snooping around. They went to many parts of the country to see how voting, or rather political parties and INEC are preparing in the different locations, regions across the country. And they had a couple of interesting findings, some they call early warning signs. And they said, I mean, many of those challenges that we usually talk about that are usually associated with elections, preparations for elections, hate speech, voter inducement, political parties, violence, vandalism, they say those are still very much present. And they also fear that we might see, although it's at low levels now, that they might see an escalation. There's a possibility that there could be an escalation going forward. But are you confident that the security forces will be on their A game, as it were, when we do approach the election proper?
That's why there is that apprehension, because if the example of what happened in Osun State is taken to be what will be repeated across the nation, especially at the presidential election, then there's cause for alarm. That's why we're saying that the security agencies are expected to be on top of their game, become less partisan. You also knew that we saw some senior security agencies at the launching of the president's campaign. And so the expectation is that they should have learned their lessons, if they want to learn at all, and make sure they are non-partisan, do their job in such a way that will gain the confidence of both the government in power and in the opposition. Yes, there's a lot of vote buying going on. You see branded rice, branded all kind of stuff. There's a lot of attempt even at intimidation and hooliganism that has been reported in the media. But I believe that the two major political parties will be able to cancel themselves out and then let the process move forward. Otherwise, I will encourage anybody who is a candidate who feels he has been intimidated, who feels money changed hands, or who feels there's anything against the Electoral Act that's been done, to simply document them properly as a condition and as a background to file the appropriate petitions at an election tribunal.
Let's take a few steps back now. Let's just step back for a moment and just look at the whole scenario. Nigeria's democracy, our political system, the judiciary, the lawmakers, the presidency. How would you say that our democracy has evolved so far since we began civilian government, as it were? Would you say that we're still at a point where we need to decide, and I've heard a lot of analysts, political analysts say this, we need to decide the kind of democracy we want to practice as Nigerians. What is your perspective on that?
Well, our democratic growth is stunted. This is not where we are supposed to be. We are where we are supposed to be between 2003 and 2007. That is within the first 4 to 8 years of our democracy. After that, we've had stunted growth, considering that we are discussing 20 years down the line, because that was 1999 to 2019, 20 years down the line. We are still troubled with basics relating to civil and political rights, not even discussing economic and social rights. So we should actually sit down to discuss the terms of our living together as a nation, because the constitution that was foisted on us was a military dictatorship constitution. It didn't have its power based in the people. It was like the federal military government hereby decrees as follows. That's how we got our constitution. And that meant that a lot is wrong with the constitution, the structure, the way we elect our president, how it emerges, how we appoint judges, how judges come to their decisions, even the structure of the legislature and the kind of money they earn. So a lot should still be up for debate.
So
I understand that democracy
so if I could just come in here, obviously you're in support of restructuring, that ongoing conversation that we've been having on the issue of restructuring.
Yes, right. Yes, not just restructuring alone. A brand new constitution that defines the terms under which we should live, because the current process is leading us nowhere. If you're doing something for 20 years and there's no improvement, rather you are going back, then you have to sit back and think. So I'm fully in support of not just restructuring alone, and a lot of tinkering with that document so that it can produce a real people's constitution that is anchored on the people, and the people are supreme, and the people will drive the process.
Eze, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate your time on the show. I've been speaking to Eze Onyekpere, Lead Director for the Center for Social Justice. So that's it on Beyond Markets. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Remember, you can watch the show at 5 p.m. West African time daily and have access to to all previous episodes of Beyond Markets on our website at cnbcafrica.com. You can also stay engaged with the hashtag Beyond Markets, and you can follow my Twitter handle too at Esther Awoniyi. For myself and the team, it's bye for now.